Okay.
And we're live.
Okay, everybody. Welcome to the April 16th, 2024 meeting of the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees, Student Life and Athletics Committee. The meeting is being held in person with committee members some committee members participating remotely. At this time, I will ask the board secretary, Michelle Carreri, if she will conduct the roll of attendees to determine if we have a quorum.
Tom Ryan,
Present by Zoom.
Jay Plasenzia,
Good morning, present via WebEx.
Robbie Luna, Armin Sabatoni,
Present via WebEx.
Robert Wagand,
Present via WebEx.
Reva Goyal, Michael Gray, Mark Parlange. We have a quorum. In addition, others who are here in the room with me today are Thor Bjorn, Garrett Waller, Casey Light, Lynn Owens, as well as James, our IT person.
Okay, we have a quorum. I'll call the meeting to order.
I apologize, and Margot Cook has joined as well, and
Oh.
she's an invited guest. Apologies,
Okay.
Margot.
Hello, Margot. Reminder to all members, for the benefit of the audience and the note taker, please clearly identify yourself whenever you are making a comment. Participants using WebEx are required to keep their cameras on. As remote members, and all persons present at this meeting must clearly be audible and visible to each other. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional stomping ground of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. The first order of business is approval of the minutes. May I have a motion that the Student Life and Athletics Committee approve the minutes of the October 25th, 2023 meeting?
This is Armin, so moved.
Second, Jay Plasenzia.
Oops, hold on. Is there a second? Oh, sorry, you got it? Great. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none. I'd ask for a voice vote. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All abstentions, all opposed, hearing none, seeing none. Motion approves. The next item few items on the agenda are basically discussion items and updates from some of our discussion we had, I think, almost a year ago. And it's basically around the athletics report, around the performance metrics that we use for student athletes in the fall and the winter, and then a facility update. As you all know, we're in the midst of a fair amount of activity down in the athletic area for fields and the track and other facilities. Then we'll also talk about the charter, and then we'll go into, as Michelle mentioned, we'll go into executive session. So with that, I will turn it over to Thor for discussion.
Great, thanks, Tom. Do you have the slides? You have the slides? Okay, let's go to the first one if we could. Thanks, everybody, for your time. We'll just go right through, and please, as we go along, if you have some questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And as Michelle said, Garrett Waller, our Associate AD for Development, is here with me, along with Casey Light, our Chief NCAA Compliance Officer, also Associate Athletic Director. It's funny, since we last spoke, there's, and we'll get into this, there's continues to be a ton of changes, and as we deal with the governance and makeup of the NCAA, but we'll keep you all abreast as information comes our way. Next slide, please. Wanted to give the academic profile for the fall 23, another very strong semester. 3.22 overall GPA for the term and 3.26 overall. You've heard me talk about this a lot. 77 different undergraduate majors, 14 graduate student or certificate students as well. What's exciting about that is that as the university continues to work on certificate programs, that does give our fifth-year student athletes a chance to maybe that are going to graduate but maybe not have the opportunity for a full graduate program to remain eligible and compete in that fifth year, utilizing some of the certificate programs. So that's really exciting. Academic probation, still another number that we're very proud of. We obviously want that at 0, but that's 2.3%, and almost 50%, 48.1% of our student athletes make the dean's list, which again is another huge point of pride. If you were at the basketball game this season, when we recognize all of our dean's list kids, it again is something that it seems like it continues to grow more and more, which is awesome. Next slide, please. Some of the successes from the fall. This is kind of cool. Our men's cross country team, for the first time in 70 years, won the New England Championship. Ben Flesher won the individual title. Pretty amazing. Football had another 4th consecutive winning season, 3rd time in history that's happened. The last time was the 82-85 time. Finished 6-5, 4-1 at home, which is pretty cool. We had 3 seniors that were invited to go off and play in different senior type bowls. And we had a number of kids that participated in Pro Day up at Bryant College about 2 weeks ago, and then others that participated at other campuses, so long as they were allowed to do so. And Kobe Tippett, former football player, was actually signed to be a special teams quality control coach with the New England Patriots. Always want to talk about some of the successes that our previous student athletes have had or continue to have. Next slide, please. Winter season highlights. Men's track won again their 4th consecutive A10 title. Jarrett Young, outstanding track performer. He was one of the kids that did that was part of our presentation last spring for the full board for the year-end meeting. Trent Baldzell, former outstanding student athlete for us, in his I think 3rd or 4th year as our head coach, was the coach of the year again. New England title champions as well. Women placed 2nd in New England's. And then as we talk about KPIs and metrics, women's swimming is one of those areas that Lily Deering's our new coach, been here for 2 years, outstanding swimmer for us. And that's a program that for the last 7 or 8 years has been at the bottom of the A10, just making some progress, earning points like we haven't earned in a long time. I think Lily's going to do a very good job for us. It's going to take her some time, but having a former student athlete that excelled is the type of coach we're looking for, especially if you can ever find one that's a former student athlete here. Women's basketball finished with a appearance in the A10 title game, lost to a good Richmond team, but that was a great run and certainly exciting. Just sort of another accomplishment for Tammy. We know we want to get that tournament championship and get to the NCAA tournament, and what she's building year after year is just a solid base to grow off of. So that's exciting. Next slide, please. Tammy Reese is, I just mentioned her, obviously very special coach. She has been selected to coach in the Team USA 3-on-3 team in Paris at the Olympics this year, which is very cool. And then Jeff Doughton, I'm sure many of you heard, Jeff has been really having some great experiences at the NBA or in the NBA G League. He just did sign with Philadelphia for the remainder of this year and also for a contract for next year. So certainly proud of him, and it's great to have him come back in the summer and visit, and I think really helps with our relationships and with former players, but then also a great attraction for current players when you see a guy like that excelling. Next slide, please. We haven't done this before, and I think it's really important with the IBB model being discussed. We have 3 sports that generate revenue, so I wanted to make sure we give comparison year over year, good and bads. And if Tom, if you'd like, or the committee would like in the future, if you'd like a longer comparison, that's fine. We thought 3 years was a good number because of COVID. But moving forward, we can certainly go back or make it a 4-year, 5-year, whatever the committee would like moving forward. Football revenue, again, really one of our better years ever. We continue to sell out games. And so it's been pretty exciting. I think what's going to be really great is when we get our new facility done. We're still limited in terms of our capacity on the east stands to make sure that we follow code. But when the new stands are done, it just gives us a greater opportunity to sell more seats. Family Day sold out in 3 days. We separated Family Day and Homecoming, so that allows us another chance to have a full capacity crowd. And then certainly spending a great amount of time on attracting students. So early on, our student attendance is significant. It drops a little bit as we get into November, but it's become a great Saturday here on campus. Next slide.
Hey, Thor, do you have any sense on how it would be good to see how our revenues in these different sports compare to others in the A10 at some point?
Yeah, I think I can probably track that down, Tom, because they everybody reports that through, I think, the EADA report. Sometimes it's not an apples to oranges comparison, but we can get that information for sure. As a matter of fact, I'll do that for our June meeting.
Okay.
Men's basketball revenue, obviously winning makes a big difference. Struggled this year, and revenue is we're very fortunate that we can respend the revenue that we generate. So we have got to get that number back up. I think the comparable, as I talk you through this, that $1.3 million number, a big part of that is the PC game at home. That's always a gross revenue number of 180 to 200,000 for us. So when you look at though where we were in 21-22, that would be the non-PC year. I think that's why I think having multi-year comparisons in the future will be beneficial to this group. But revenue is critical, and winning is the best marketing tool out there. And so we know we have to win. We've got to get better. And so we're spending a lot of time right now with some of the marketing initiatives we're doing. We're getting our student athletes, our players, and our coaches out in the community this summer. We have some good plans for that. Going into next year, we should have with PC at home, unless the A10 changes up our scheduling structure. We'll also have programs like Dayton VCU, historically great ticket sales programs for us. And then we also have a return date from College of Charleston coming back to campus. So I think that will help our revenue numbers. But I'm not kidding myself. The best marketing tool out there is winning. Next slide, please. Women's basketball revenue. Again, since Tammy's been here, I think we've done a great job in terms of growing attendance. The revenue numbers just aren't there. And that's just not unique for us. And again, I think for your request, Tom, I think being able to show some of that comparable with A10 programs, I think we'll see that. But continue to grow our season ticket sales, continue to grow our game by game ticket revenue. For anybody that was able to attend, we had almost 7,000 people at Education Day, which is basically, we used to call it Field Trip Day, where a bunch of elementary schools come out to the Ryan Center for an afternoon game. It was pretty special, and something that we'll continue to do. And I think the kids had a great time, and that one is it's the loudest the Ryan Center gets, I think, even if we're playing PC and on the men's side. 6,900 screaming elementary school kids is pretty loud. And as I said before, 2024 was our first appearance in the A10 finals in 21 years. Next slide, please. I mentioned.
Thor?
Yep, go ahead.
Thor, it's Margot.
Hi, Margot.
Hey, so we have a good trend there, but the nominal numbers are low. Are other schools? Can we gather anything from other schools in their programs? Is there anything coming off of this? Obviously this women's basketball season was amazing. Like you mentioned the elementary school kids. Are there ways to tap into like high school programs? Or I'm just curious if there's anything in the that you're thinking about from an idea standpoint that maybe the board could be helpful with. It just feels like it's such a successful program, but we just can't seem to get the people there.
It's a great question, Margot. There's certain limitations to what we can and can't do around high schools for NCAA purposes. But that said, our group sales initiatives are pretty strong. One of the biggest challenges on the women's basketball side, and I would say probably at a lot of programs outside of the Power Fives, are the price of tickets are really low. And we do that because of our demographic is certainly an older demographic or young families. So you can come to a game very inexpensively, and obviously URI students are free for that field trip day, that's also free tickets for that particular game too. So I think we always want to be careful about how we price our tickets based on the demographics we're going after. I think where we have and continue to have great opportunity is the growing success, having our teams out in the communities to build and continue to build that fan base. You know, again, I'm not kind of I don't think overemphasizing this enough. I mean, Tammy has the right personality and the right connections throughout the community to really help grow that. You know, we always want to grow season ticket sales, even though the prices are very inexpensive, but that will ideally encourage more people to come to games night in and night out. So yeah, we will always continue to do that. We can go back and do a comparison. I think probably the best thing we can do in that regard, for your question, is, you know, where do we compare season ticket price wise and individual game price wise with our peers, and see how we're doing in those areas. But
to Margot's point, we have an enthusiastic, community orientated coach. We have a great season. I mean, our record speaks for itself, and yet we're not attracting fans. So
yeah,
and we have a low ticket price. I'm talking absolute numbers of fans, not the revenue dollars. We should look into that. I mean, is it time of game? Is it the day of game? I don't know the answer to it, but it's got all the elements of attracting a decent crowd.
agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Especially in light of what's going on with women's basketball across the country, and now the WNBA, and what Caitlin and the whole crew did for women's basketball is certainly higher on the radar screen. And I don't know if there's something we can do with young women in the area to attract them to the games. I don't have an answer to it, but it seems like we have the elements: low ticket prices, great coach, great teams, good record, and attendance doesn't follow. So
yeah, it's great opportunity. You know, the attendance is gone up if we play the percentage game significantly, but let's play the realistic game of the numbers. So I agree with you. And you know, we did move our games back to 6 p.m. on weeknights with the idea that we think based on the demo that I mentioned, that would be helpful. Yeah. We didn't think we needed to play the 7 o'clock games, and then the afternoon games we continue to try to grow. So, no, I think the best thing about our women's there's great opportunity around our women's program to continue to grow that. I'm going to be excited to see how we leverage the NCAA tournament, because I think those numbers, as we all know, on the women's side, were so significant. We need to really play that out. I mean, the amount of exposure the WNBA draft got yesterday was awesome. And so completely agree that, you know, we've got to make sure, because we're in a very fortunate situation with the great coach and with the success over the last few years, to really capitalize on it and grow it. And I think, if I'm hearing you both right, you know, the revenue is important, but attendance is more important right now. You know, if we get that number up to 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 per game, that's significant, and the revenue will follow. But we got to make sure we're putting together a fun experience, the right timing, and making sure we're out in the community to get people to show up here.
Yeah, it's just to get more people on campus, more people involved in the university. It's not the actual dollars here are not going to make that much of a difference. I think it's more eyeballs and people on campus.
Yeah.
No question.
Okay.
Thank you. So on the, you know, along those same lines, really, again, talking about some of the things we're doing around the fan experience. Bridget St. Leger is our new marketing associate AD. She's really done a good job. If you're walking around the concourses, you can see a lot of different things happening, rather than some of the same old stuff we've done in the past. Creating family zones, Hoop Fest preseason, everything we do, we tie in both men's and women's to try to capitalize on the crossover of fan base. Certainly spending as much time as we can to attract students. That creates the environment that we need and looking forward to. And so I think our fan day, it's not at the minor league level, but because we don't do as much pre or in between games or in between innings. But I think when you walk around and, you know, families come to these different events, I think they're having a really good time. And this is the part that again, from a fan experience we can control. We can't always control the outcome on the court, but we can control people's experiences around. So we're spending a lot of time and energy in these areas. Next slide, please. Some of the fundraising initiatives that we have going on, we'll get into a little bit more in depth for each one of these, but obviously the athletic complex renewal project, annual support, still critical. What Garrett and his team have done around Day of Giving is now so important for us, and we continue to break records, and hopefully we can keep going down that pathway. And then the new bear of challenge that we're facing and continues to change, and then the layers of change and impact are significant that we'll also get into: name, image, and likeness. Next slide, please. The athletics complex renewal, again, focusing on meet, stands, track, backfield, softball complex, and soccer. Populous, great company, architectural firm, has received the bid to do the design for all of the projects. We're doing them all together. They did the initial design for Meade Stadium, and then their subcontract, their sub-designer, Clough Harbor, CHA, also did our initial design for the track. We had our meetings 10 days ago with our coaches in those different areas, and so there's some great opportunity associated with that. Very excited about that. And timing will be, what I think, also having Populous do this, and then when we go out to bid from a contractor perspective, the plan is to have, as of today, that could change, but the plan is to have the same contractor do all the projects, because they're going to be done at different times. I think we hope that'll be a benefit in terms of pricing, but then also having trucks and workers here on site for whether it's Meade Stadium at a particular time or the track at a different time. I think there's some, we're hoping there's some efficiencies there. Next slide, please. Total cost, $82 million. That's the request that we had made. We received the RICAP funding at 65.8. Our fundraising requirement is 16.5. We're actually going to go forward with a $20 million campaign through the foundation. We received our first $1 million gift towards this. I think now that we'll have our drawings and our ability to go out and sell different areas, that'll be a benefit and help us in that regard. So full steam ahead with that. Next slide.
What's the Thor? What's the timing on this for completion?
Sure. Can you go back up one slide?
I missed that.
Nope, you didn't. Next one. Sorry. I'm sorry. Go to the facility slide, please, just so I can get my bearing. There we go. So the way Meade Stadium will work, they're going to be doing the actual design for that now. Then when they go out to bid, Tom, it's probably going to be for contractor. It's probably going to be sometime next summer, by the time the contract's awarded. So our plan is on the football side to play 24 and 25 in Meade. And then construction will begin basically the day after the 25 season, last game at home ends. And that'll take about a year, maybe a little bit longer, to a year and a half to finish that. So we're in FY26, fall of 26, we're going to end up playing some other location, and we've got some things that we're feelers out that we're starting to look at. Where can we play for that 1 year when we have to go on the road? Track and field, because the track is unusable now, we're fortunate so that whenever we're ready to go and do that, we as soon as we're ready in the contractor's name, we can start that project right now. We're not displacing anybody. Backfield, there's a critical need to replace the artificial surface there. So we actually peeled off some RICAP funds to do that. That's the #1 priority for baseball. They're going to be doing that this August. The replacement of the artificial surface. That surface was provided to us by a donor probably 16 years ago. So it's outlived its shelf life. It's still okay to use, but it's getting worn out. So we know we needed to get that replaced. That'll be about a 10-year solution there. The softball complex and soccer complex, we're going to be similar to what we do with baseball and the revenue that we're able to bring in. We're going to basically phase these projects in. We know the most critical need for the facilities, and what we sold and talked about with the governor and the speaker and the state house was press box, stands, restroom areas in those facilities. So that'll be our first and foremost focus. Then we'll also, because of the way the planning is going to be done, and how, depending on how fundraising and cash coming into the bank works, we'll be able to pick off some of the other phases of those projects as we move along. So we are going to back up. We're going to go and take the full amount of the projected budgeted money that when we made our initial ask. Meade Stadium was 42 million. The track was about 12. We're going to go full steam ahead on getting Meade Stadium done. And we know we're going to be raising money against that. We know we're going to be raising money against naming the press box, naming the stands, naming other areas within that facility. But what we don't want to do is delay what could be a 20% fundraising need, and have this pushed back 2, 3 years, 4 years as we generate and actually receive the cash to do those projects, knowing that escalation will kick in. It'll become a much more expensive project than the initial estimate of the 42 million. So we're going full steam ahead there. With the track, we're going to make sure that we can build it so that we can host an A10 championship. So that will be the track surface, the infield, throws area, restrooms, etc. That may not include the full complement of stands at this point. And then basically, as we raise the funds from those projects, which we believe we can raise a significant portion of our required, 16 million, or ultimate goal of 20. That money, the best way I've been describing it to donors is almost think about it going into a pot that we can then allocate to the Beck Field project, the soccer complex project, and the softball project, because we know we're phasing those in. The biggest concern I had was making sure that we weren't going to price ourselves through escalation out of our $42 million budget number for the stands, or the $12 million budget number for the track.
So just am I correct that we'll be in the existing Meade Stadium with stands for the season of 24 and 25.
Correct.
We'll be playing somewhere else in 26, and this all won't get done till 27.
That's correct. That
seems like a long time to me.
Oh, it does, Tom. Yeah,
well,
agree.
why it stands in a press box, and why is it? I mean, I'm not going to get into the detail, but is there something we can do, the board or some trustees, to help this process through from a timing? I don't know, permitting or bidding, or I don't know the details, and I'm not trying to get into the details, but it does feel like a long time. And one of the strategic discussions we've had as a board with not only the athletic complex, but academic buildings, dorms, all these projects that go on in the university that for years have taken longer. We're trying to shorten the timeline. And I don't know what the answer is, but I would certainly like to see why it's taking so long to get it. I mean, it's not like we're building a new stadium.
Completely agree, and I can keep you posted on that and get that information.
It'd be good to see a timeline on that. How this thing plays out for. I was reading something the other day. They built the Empire State Building in a year and a half, and I said we can't build a 4-bedroom house in 4 years. So there is something about it that we can do some engineering here from the process and see that we can be playing in a new stadium before 2027.
That would be great. That would be great.
Tom, I think your point's well taken, and to see the timeline and figure out like where are the hot spots, like what's slowing it down. And I know you may not, I don't know if you have that, I'm sure you have it laid out, but it might be helpful to like stare at where in that timeline are those hurdles happening. And is it like one particular vendor? Is it money? Is it like what slows it down?
Right.
It feels like a long time.
Yeah, if I may, I'll just jump in here because this is Abby, by the way, Abby Benson, and I appreciate this conversation. Is something we're thinking about a lot internally, and we're actually going through and sort of looking at timelines of our past major projects and laying out timelines for the ones that are underway to sort of look at what the common areas are. And I will say a lot of them are related to the sort of state purchasing process and code review. So for example, it can take 2 to 3 months to even just get code review of our documents through the state. So one thing we're talking about is how can we be more communicative? You know, we factor in what we think is a realistic timeline, but how can we be more communicative with state agencies and other stakeholders about where the delays are, so that we can open up conversation about maybe moving things along more quickly. But we'll certainly get you a timeline.
Great.
And we can have that discussion, a more informed discussion.
Whatever the board can do to help that with the right people and the right discussion, that would be great, because I'm sure there are bottlenecks in some areas that we could help.
Yeah, and the design process does take a while. We're doing them all as a package, which I think is actually really beneficial from a design standpoint. But as a result, it'll take a little longer than if we were just doing sort of the design for the stadium or design for the track. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's the right approach to have, you know, more uniformity with all the projects. So, but yes, we'll get to you a timeline.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Next slide, please. All right, so here we go. Name, image, and likeness. You know, it's becoming the biggest, most important thing that we do related to our men's and women's basketball programs. Some changes of some things that since we last spoke. The URI's official collective is actually switched and now is being operated by Coast to Coast in Rhode Island. And the collective has hired our alum Stone Freeman to really be out, boots on the ground, working under the direction of some of the folks from Coast to Coast who also have been doing this successfully. So I think that's going to make a big difference for us. You know, critically important. The term, you know, Tom and I and others have talked about this in the past. I mean, the term donor fatigue is a national term that's being used around NIL right now. So we need to continue to find creative ways to ideally at some point soon, take this out of the need for you know, high level donors to contribute and fund this exclusively. I mean, that is what's happening at different places, but there's ways that we can try to, and that's what's happened here at Rhode Island. Otherwise we wouldn't be in the game at all. But things since we've been able to make the move, some of the areas of focus, a subscription-based plan that's moving forward, that's really focusing on you know, a month-by-month contribution, cash flow piece. So, you know, we're certainly hoping to build some revenue that way. Trying to come up with some creative, beneficial corporate sponsorship opportunities, both local and nationally. We're utilizing our Learfield partnership there. We have to think creatively about Learfield in ways that we can utilize funds from a marketing initiative that could certainly impact us from our general revenue budgeting process, but at the same time, as I said right from the beginning, the best marketing tool we have within athletics to, I think, then market the entire university is a successful basketball program. So we need to think about how we're investing those funds. So that's something that spending a lot of time to make sure we do it right, make sure there's no NCAA compliance issues associated with it, but we have to get incredibly aggressive. I don't want to say creative, I want to say aggressive in terms of how we go about doing that. Also looking at running events, golf tournaments, other types of events within the community to try to educate people on NIL, but also generate revenue. So we have a lot of work to do. I don't mean to sound dramatic, but that's probably the most, you know, one of the most important things that we are doing now in focusing on that. Fan base doesn't necessarily love it. And again, we're not unique. I'm making generalized comments here, but it is what it is. It's not going away. Forgive me for saying this because I'm sort of getting off slide here, but you know, I've heard over the last 3 months numerous times in talking to people, when's the NCAA going to change this? When's the NCAA going to get rid of NIL? When's the NCAA going to get rid of the transfer portal? That's not happening. Those things aren't an NCAA driven issue. Those are court mandated issues. So, you know, we do not have, or the NCAA does not have that opportunity to make those changes. So this is sticking with us. And, you know, basically, this is my opinion, this is year 2 of NIL. And it continues to grow and become a significantly important piece of recruiting.
I will, sorry, Thor, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom, please.
No, I will just make a comment on it since I'm actively involved in this. Spent more time on NIL than I think I did in 5 years, 6 years with the School of Pharmacy, which is interesting. Speaks volumes of what's happening across the country with student athletes. But the Thor's point, this is not going to go back in the bottle. The genie's out. I think the people should understand the NIL and the collective are different. The student has the right to sell their name, image, and likeness. The collective is money that's raised that contributes to the student to do certain activities. So there is some talk about, I don't know how it would happen, but some talk about a standard payment for student athletes, flat fee, fairly equal, that would address all athletes, not just revenue driven sports. So that's a whole nother question. And then the student would just, if the student could sell themselves to Taco Bell or Postcard House or insurance company, then they would do that on their own. And that's what name, image, and likeness was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the student athlete could use their name, image, and likeness for commercial purposes. It's morphed into something else now. I will tell you that URI is probably in the middle of the pack in the A10. We thought we were a little higher, but we're probably middle, maybe slightly higher from a collective standpoint. All our collections were basically donor driven in the first year we started it. The goal now is to have, this is directionally, to have 50% of our funding coming directly from donors instead of 100%, and then 25% from corporations, advertising, and events, which is just to Thor's point, which is why we went with Coast to Coast and Stone Freeman to actually drive this part of the revenue stream. We're looking for creative ways to drive it. I will tell you, I talked personally to the individual running Duke's program, and they have donor fatigue. Their donors are pushing back. Now, can you imagine basketball donors at Duke pushing back? This is symptomatic of an issue across the country. Same things. I've talked to someone at Hofstra, at all different schools, at all different conferences, and I'm not sure it's sustainable. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but in the meantime, we need to participate. And unfortunately, there's not a direct correlation between the amount the collective has and the success of the team at this point. But I do know if we don't have a collective that's competitive, we will definitely not have success. So unfortunately, that's the way it is. There's work being done, to Thor's point, new head of NCA, but it's a legal issue and a court issue. And there's court challenges in Virginia and Tennessee around this. So more to come, and it's a lot to changing, but I think we need to participate, and we're trying to do it the right way for our school and our student athlete and our donors. So I'll be happy to take any offline questions on if anybody wants it.
Thor and Tom, have you seen yet any crowding out of other sports or other opportunities that, I mean, you don't really know what the opportunity cost is, but there's got to be some initial read on what effect this is having.
I think it's having I don't know what the amount is, Margot, but directionally it has to have an effect on overall giving to the university, right? Someone has a finite amount of money that they're going to give, and if they were giving X to the university for academics or a scholarship, now they might give X amount minus Y, and the Y goes to the NIL. So it's not deductible, unlike the a donation to the university. So I think there's still that incentive to drive funds to the university from tax deductibility standpoint. I will say some schools are pushing the envelope and trying NILs that are tax deductible. They're not-for-profit NILs. The IRS has ruled on that pretty succinctly that they don't think that holds water. But I think schools will try it, and if it doesn't hold up, it's not the school's issue. It's not the student athlete's issue. It's the donor's issue. The donor will have to, it'll affect the donor's future tax liabilities going forward. So I don't know the answer to it, Margo, but it would seem to me intuitively it's taking something from the pot. I just don't know how much. We've worked to that point. We've worked with Lil to make sure that we work in tandem on the donors. We try not to cross over. As you can imagine, if you look at, I think 6% of all alumni across the country give to schools. So we're dealing with a small group of people, and maybe smaller at URI. So it's hard not to have an overlap, but we're trying not to do that. We're trying to work in concert with Lil, and I know Garrett and Thor are doing the same thing.
It's trying to be very transparent, to Tom's point, with the foundation. It's interesting. A year ago, I can't remember if I said it in this meeting or not, but a year ago, if a donor had X amount of dollars to give, we'd say, please give that, continue to give that, and we'd ask you for an incremental gift towards NIL. As we go forward and think about the importance of what NIL means to our basketball programs and attracting, and I didn't even mention this, retaining players.
Yeah.
And that's a significant one that, there's new things that come up every day, it feels like, but the retention is a critically important piece too. But when you go back and look at those revenue numbers, our one of our best opportunities to generate revenue is success in right now in men's basketball, getting back to the tournament. You've all heard that many times. There's millions of dollars that we could do based on the success of the basketball programs. So NIL is that new important piece of this deal. We have gotten the support that we've needed from the president and from the foundation, and we do spend a lot of time realizing that both areas of support are critically important, but this NIL piece becomes even more and more important every day as we go along. So yeah, there'll be
how upside down it is now, and it's Caitlin Clark, I think I don't know what the exact number is, but I think she signed a $400,000 contract for 3 years with the WNBA, and she was making $1.2 million at Iowa, $1.2 million a year on NIL.
And that Caitlin Clark's contract with the WNBA is less than $80,000 a year. That's
76,000.
Yeah,
there you go. So
it's incredible.
We're in a colliding universe here. All right.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Some national issues. Casey was going to take on some of these.
Sure. Casey Light from Athletics. So kind of what we've talked about and where this NIL landscape has gone and some of the trends that are kind of out there is that, this environment, produces a mixture of what we think are unauthentic deals versus legitimate ones. What are student athletes really being paid there? And, is NIL being used as pay for play and just recruiting inducements? NCAA is kind of coming down with enforcement on some violations in this space, but again, certain lawsuits and things like that leading to, more ability to use NIL as recruiting, having collectives be able to engage directly with recruits to help them in their decision-making process. And then, congressional action and bills coming forward in states, including a Rhode Island bill as well. What the NCAA is doing to kind of curb some things is putting in some student athlete protections, which this legislation you can see kind of on the right side of the screen will be effective August 1st, and includes a voluntary service provider registration process. So student athletes would be able to see through a database kind of who has been vetted as a kind of agent in the NIL space, coming out with some standardized contract terms, providing comprehensive NIL education, and then making disclosure requirements for student athletes with deals over $600, which would then require the institution to report that back to them, which again, the thought is that would help to show what is a legitimate, rate for a student athlete versus kind of these made up numbers that people think we're hearing.
I'm going to just jump in real quick on that one. To Casey's point, you hear so many rumors, which mean we hear so many rumors about a student athlete at school X that turned down $1 million offer, NIL offer to go, to either not stay or to leave. What nobody knows is whether those are true or not. And so student athletes are making decisions to go into a portal or to turn down opportunities to play at schools because they're not getting necessarily factual information. So we kind of hope, that's why I think that transparency piece with some sort of portal that students can actually look at and see what deals are in play so they can make realistic decisions. That's kind of what that means. We'll see if that doesn't face a lawsuit as well. It probably will, but that's why that's in place. Next slide, please.
So just to that point, what is this legislation that's August of 24? Can you go back?
Yeah, one slide.
Where is this? This is federal legislation?
No, NCAA legislation.
NCAA legislation.
Yep.
And that hasn't been challenged in the courts, or how is that?
No, because I mean, mostly this stuff is put in, as they're calling it, student athlete protection. So it's mostly to the benefit of the student. So there, hasn't been any pushback yet. The hardest thing, that disclosure piece, actually puts most of the onus on like us, the institution, and a requirement that we have to fulfill. So,
so what does that mean, disclosure? So if we sign a basketball player to an X amount of money, that's disclosed within 30 days of signing?
Yep, it should be. And I mean, that's currently in our institutional policy, and that how we use our open doors platform, where student athletes are sharing this information with us. And we kind of tell them it's for that reason, right? We're trying to protect their eligibility. We're not going to ever say like you can or can't do it, but we're just here to advise based on what would keep you eligible or ineligible.
Student athletes disclosing that to the university, it's not disclosed publicly.
Nope.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay.
But Tom, that is part of the conversation about whether or not there should be some sort of public portal where student athletes can have that access.
Exactly.
And I know, especially early on with NIL, when we would get the open records requests for some of this information, working with Lauren Jensen, especially, we would never disclose like a student's name or, what type of deal they had. We would just flat out give number values and things like that. So that information is still protected under FERPA.
Okay.
Next slide.
And so going with kind of some of the lawsuit trends, kind of the biggest one that we're kind of working through right now has to do with the transfer rules. And so there was a temporary restraining order issued in December that then was converted to a preliminary injunction that would restrict the NCAA from applying their transfer rule that would limit student athletes from transferring and competing immediately at the next school. So kind of this unlimited transfer space. The kind of next category of lawsuits that we have kind of out there are student athletes as employees litigation, with Dartmouth and those student athletes trying to unionize, and basically these cases saying that because student athletes have regulations on their practice time and travel hours, that they should be treated as employees. That is kind of in a holding right now, kind of waiting to see how that will all shake out. I think Dartmouth is the one that's gone the furthest. And then the third category, kind of dealing with the antitrust legislation. So cases where student athlete earnings were being either restricted or denied based on certain NCAA legislation. So that's, some of the Tennessee and Virginia ones with student athletes not being able to communicate about their NIL prior to signing, the transfer policies and things like that.
So the two things in those lawsuits that were out there, where they matter, why they connected, transfer portal and NIL are now connected, where the ruling is you can have unlimited transferring, because the argument is if we tell a kid or the NCAA says here's our rule that doesn't allow a kid to transfer a second time without having to sit, or a third time, technically you're limiting their ability to generate NIL money. So that was that argument, that, and how they're so interconnected there. Next slide, please. Sports wagering is actually another huge issue that we're facing. You know, sports betting is allowed in 35 states, Rhode Island being one of them. There's actually some wagering cases that came to light this past year. Iowa State, Alabama, and this is only going to continue to grow. This has been a concern since, and you know, again, I know there's a lot of money that can be generated for states, and these, you know, as sports betting is legal, and betting on games is one thing. Prop bets, which are now allowed just about everywhere. Prop bets meaning, like, you know, if a kid misses the first foul shot of a game, you know, I bet on that, or I bet on who wins a jump ball, or I bet on, you know, any number of different things. I again, personal, you know, getting on my own soapbox here. I mean, that puts our student athletes at incredible risk. And when so much gambling is taking place on college campuses, in dorms, not just at Rhode Island, everywhere, access to student athletes is significant. And these types of prop bets are, I think, going to continue to become a real problem. Next slide, please. We do provide, I'm sorry, with that, we do provide as much education as we possibly can, and we'll continue to do that more. So this next slide is, and I won't get into this. I was thinking about it, and I'll email it through Michelle to you all. It's a public document. It's a white paper that the 1AAA and FCS groups within, that's our framework as an FCS program, football championship subdivision program. A lot of times we'll be in conversation with 1AAA teams, which are non-big Power 5 football programs or non-FBS football programs, just really trying to focus on how do we get back to sort of the education-centric student-athlete model, basically saying that athletics is just one portion of their overall educational experience, and what do we do to try to work our way through that. I think in a lot of ways, this is going to be a document that could be utilized by Congress as we work towards getting some level of antitrust help. Maybe there is at some point some separation. This is just in the world according to me, some separation between the Power 5 football programs and everybody else, but it just gets us thinking differently. You know, maybe it's something as simple as saying, hey, we look at one sport leagues in terms of a basketball centric program and more regional programs in you know, for our other sports. How do we continue to provide opportunities for students so they can compete, and realizing that 92 or 93% of our programs across the country do not operate in the black. They're funded through student tuition or student fees. And I think that's really been an area that's been missing. And I think this document is pretty well done. It's the initial framework, but like I said, I'll make sure, I'll ask Michelle to send this out for everybody. And again, it's a public document, so we can post it as required anywhere is needed. So next slide, please.
I think that's really encouraging, Thor. I think this I mean, we all believe it's really twisted athletics at colleges. It's not athlete student, it's student athlete. Most of these students are not going to professional. It's part of the college experience, and it's really gotten twisted out of perspective. So I'm glad that type of paper is starting to circulate.
Thank you, Margaret. I couldn't agree more. And there's so much misunderstanding out there where everybody, the general population, seems to believe that we're all operating under the, you know, the Ohio State, Texas models, and we're not, and very few are, and even at the Power 5 level. So to try to, you know, make sure that we're educating, I mean, Congress to be able, and we've already had our conversations with our delegation. Other schools are doing the same thing, so that they understand that by some of these decisions, by all of a sudden, if you know, Tom mentioned before, if we ever get to the point where you're paying student athletes some sort of stipend, you know, Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, talked about he threw out a number of $30,000 for 50% of your student athletes. That's probably, you know, $7-8 million at the University of Rhode Island. That's going to impact your ability to provide scholarships for kids, to provide sports sports opportunities for our students. The impacts are significant, and the people that can actually help with this, Congress, need to be educated on what that truly means, because it's significant. And, you know, if all of a sudden we have so many of our, you know, I always talk and sing praise of our students and what they're doing academically, what they're doing in the real world when they graduate. Those opportunities, I think a lot of us are very worried that they're going to start going away because you just can't afford it any longer. So it's a big deal. So I'll definitely share this. I think it's a good, and I'd love anybody's feedback on it. And if you ever want to talk about it. The holistic benefit model, we've talked about this before, but this is something that's coming again in August. And, you know, just requirements of what you need to provide your students based upon being a Division I member. We've gone through and spent a lot of time over the past year making sure that we're hitting on all of these. It's sort of a best practices, you know, do it on your own campus type of thing. So, you know, where some schools may say we're going to hire 3 sports psychologists, we have a wonderful relationship with our, you know, psychological consultation center. That's how we're handling this at this point, as just one small example. So we're doing these things. We'll continue to try to enhance them where we can, but we feel like we're in. I think it's really important to report out that I think we're in a very good position to make sure that we're doing what is required as of even before the August 1st deadline. Next slide, please. So that's it. Certainly any questions, love to answer if anybody has anything as a result of those.
Anybody on the committee have any questions, comments? I think we asked some of them as we were going along, Thor, so there's some follow-ups to do. So
yep,
we'll take that from there. Anybody else have any comments, questions? Okay. Thanks, Thor.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a review of our charter, which we last reviewed in April of 23, I believe, a year ago. It's in our bylaws that we review this on a regular basis. I will tell you that Thor and Ellen had no significant changes, and no changes actually to the charter. Unless anybody on the committee has any comments or recommendations on the charter, I would say we should just leave it as it is. I'm not sure, Michelle, do we need a vote on this, on the charter approval?
No, we don't.
Okay,
For the April meeting, what we do is we have discussion, and then if there are changes, we bring those changes to the June meeting
Okay.
for action. So
this is good to know. This is good to know. Okay, we're set. The next item is a review of our committee calendar. I don't know if you can pop that up there, Michelle. Can we do that? Is that possible? You should be in here. This is just a heads up for calendar and the items we'll be discussing on a go forward basis. You don't have it on here. Okay. If we can't get it on there, Michelle, it should be, we'll send it out. I think it's in some of the handouts.
yes, it's in the agenda as an enclosure, and
Right.
we can pull it up if you need to. Just
Anybody have any if you have any issues with the calendar, you can't make, we just want to make sure that we have a quorum. I know everybody's busy, and I appreciate your time. Hopefully the WebEx helps everybody attend, but we've tried to keep it similar so people have a schedule. It doesn't move around too much. Okay, with that, I know we're running out of time a little bit, but we want to enter into executive session to discuss potential or anticipated litigation. May I have a motion that the Student Life and Athletics Committee of the URI Board convene into executive session?
So moved, Bob Wiegand.
Is there a second?
Amen, second.
Any discussion? There being no discussion, can I get a voice vote? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion's approved. We will now convene into executive session. It should last about 20 minutes or so, and then we will be back. You have to join it.
Okay, we're all live again. So what you'll need to do is unmute because it automatically defaults to muting everybody. So just unmute, and then Tom, what you'll do is the first order of business in open session, a motion to seal the executive session minutes.
Are we open, Michelle? We're live. Okay. I have a motion to seal the executive sessions minutes of our April Student Life and Athletics Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second,
And I have a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, say no. Anybody abstain? Motion is approved. Now I'd like any discussion anybody would like to bring up before we adjourn? Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the Student Life and Athletics Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
This is so moved.
Do I have a second? Bob, thank you. All in favor of the adjourning this meeting, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks,